Thank you for joining us for Unite for Sight's webinar entitled Beyond Good Intentions, Storytelling and Responsible Communication in Global Health. We're thrilled to have all of you with us here today. My name is Amy Bellman Davis, and I am the Executive Director of Unite for Sight. I'll briefly introduce you to Unite for Sight, review the webinar logistics, and then we'll hear from our 7 expert panelists. Unite for Sight is a global health nonprofit organization that promotes high-quality care for all. We offer extensive global health and social entrepreneurship education programs. Our Global Health University program offers a free webinar series, including today's webinar. We also offer 20 online certificate programs for students and professionals. Many students receive academic credit for completion of our certificates, and professionals often pursue the certificates for professional development. Additional educational opportunities for students and professionals include participation in Unite for Sight's annual Global Health and Social Entrepreneurship events, which focus on responsible global engagement. Our 17th annual Global Health and Innovation Conference will be on April 4 and 5, 2020 at Yale University and the historic Shubert Theater. The conference includes more than 200 speakers and more than 2,000 participants for a weekend exchange of ideas across all disciplines of global health, international development, and social entrepreneurship. The conference website may be found at www.uniteforsight.org/conference. We also have healthcare delivery programs that provide care to patients living in extreme poverty. We partner with phenomenal local eye clinics in Ghana, Honduras, and India to provide quality eye care to patients who are otherwise unable to access or afford care. These programs are locally led and managed, and our collaboration has provided eye care to over 2.7 million people by local doctors, including more than 106,000 sight-restoring surgeries by local ophthalmologists. Unite for Sight is the world's only organization that is a healthcare delivery organization that also offers immersive global health education and social entrepreneurship opportunities for students and professionals. Participants support and learn from local doctors in Ghana, Honduras, and India as they provide care to patients living in extreme poverty in villages, slums, and refugee camps. Participants learn from the local medical professionals about patient barriers to care and about effective strategies to reach the hardest to reach patients. The local doctors are social entrepreneurs who design effective and innovative strategies to eliminate patient barriers to care. Now I'll describe the basic logistics of this webinar. We're so delighted to have all of you with us today. We have 7 amazing panelists, and they have a wealth of expertise to share with you during this next hour. Each of our panelists will give a 2-minute introduction about themselves, their current role, and their key guidance or lesson learned regarding storytelling and responsible communication in global health. We'll then dedicate the remaining time to your questions and answers. We received stellar questions already submitted from you, our audience, by Tuesday's question submission deadline. We selected the most common and most thoughtful questions to ask our panelists. We also invite you to submit additional questions in the text box on the left of your webinar screen, and we will include some of those questions in our discussion today too. We also encourage you to tweet about the webinar, including your key lessons learned, by using the hashtag GHUWebinar, and you can see the hashtag in the webinar visuals on your screen. We'll proceed with having our panelists introduce themselves in alphabetical order. I'm delighted to introduce you to our first panelist, Charlotte Cole. Please begin by introducing yourself, your background and current role, and please share your key guidance or lesson learned regarding storytelling and responsible communication in global health.
Hello, everyone. I'm Charlotte Cole. I'm delighted to be here. I'm the Executive Director of Blue Butterfly Collaborative. We're a nonprofit that helps media makers in low-income countries create high-quality educational media for children. I'm a developmental psychologist by training, and with my team, we build content that supports a range of international development efforts in a variety of sectors, including health and education. And we support the development across a range of activities, including curriculum development, research, production, and project management. regarding the key guidance that you asked about lessons learned about storytelling, I guess I would just say that storytelling is a powerful way to teach. And I think good storytelling connects with your audience. So for children, it needs to be relatable to the lives that children lead and to connect with people's emotions in some way. And because as humans, we experience a large spectrum of emotional states, there's a lot of potential for lifting understanding by tapping into that spectrum in different ways. And that's what we try to do with Blue Butterfly and the content that we're producing with our media and through our partners all over the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte. Paul, would you please introduce yourself next?
Sure. Thanks, Amy. So good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Paul Ellingstead, and I'm the Managing Director of PTI Advisors. So I do consulting and strategic advisory services in innovation, leadership, and innovation. And, some of my clients, for example, now include Pearson, the world's learning company, Foundation Paraguay, and a number of community development organizations in sustainability and social enterprise as well. In terms of background, I think just, the context of our topic here today, I'll go back a little bit further than normal just to say that I grew up in South Dakota, and in terms of, speech and communications, really feel that I had some of the best teachers in the world that, started to instill the inspiration, the motivation, to really focus on learning storytelling and communication. And I've also had the privilege of having some great mentors and teachers along the way in my corporate career too, with Gateway, Compaq, and HP. In terms of the guidance and lessons learned regarding storytelling and responsible communication, I think first of all, sometimes it's regarded, particularly if you get into a larger organization, there might be a communications department, or you have particular people that's their job, is to do the, to lead the communications. But it's important to remember that whatever your role, whatever your responsibility, you have a responsibility to understand the importance of communication in whatever role that you're in, and that, that function and that competency is managed in an effective way. I'd say with that, I've had the privilege of working with some of the best, a couple people I'll call out, that really helped us, with effective storytelling. Tasha Freitas, who now runs Needsless, and Micro Documentaries was another really, really powerful storytelling organization that we worked with to do really effective and competent communications. Thanks.
Thank you, Paul. Alex, would you please introduce yourself next?
Yes, hi everyone. I'm Alex Kendall. I'm a Vice President at Global Health Strategies, or GHS, and GHS is a global health advocacy and communications firm. So we work with many of the leading global health organizations, philanthropies, nonprofits around the world to better communicate about their priorities and programs, to generate momentum around issues, and to impact policy change and funding for global health. And at the core of what we do is try to tell stories. We try to find ways to help connect people with global health issues and their real world impact, and in doing so, hopefully compel them to act. So when I think about storytelling, and I should say that, I don't think communications is always storytelling. I think storytelling is a particular form. And when I think about responsible storytelling, I think a lot about how we try to humanize global health issues and work with people around the world to share their lived experiences to help people better understand and connect with the global health issues we're talking about. And I think that my core piece of advice is that the best storytelling that I've been involved in has been really based on relationships, on authentic, trusted relationships with the people whose stories are being told, and it's required me to work with a lot of humility and flexibility to let the impacted individuals' personal experiences actually guide the process rather than my initial organizational goals.
Thank you, Alex. Firdos, would you please introduce yourself?
Certainly. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm absolutely delighted to be here once again with United for Sight, a conference I've spoken to several times and look forward to speaking at again next year. Inspired by doing simple jobs at the age of 8 for Mother Teresa in my native Calcutta, I have had a desire to have a social impact throughout my life. So I started a social enterprise about 25 years ago in Ottawa, Canada, where I'm speaking to you from today, using mass communications to better the human condition. I have created a number of documentaries and television series, but perhaps I'm best known for creating over 4,000 animated shorts, which have been versioned into 355 language versions, used in 198 countries, and seen by at least 1 billion people, if not over 2 billion people. At the conclusion of the seminar, you can go to my Vimeo channel and you can see some of my work and download it and use it free of charge. There are approximately 3,700 animated shorts available to you in a variety of languages, hundreds of languages, and on a variety of topics. I have done about 46 animated series so far. In terms of your question as to what are the main lessons learned, I think that I take advantage of the new age that we live in. Innovation and technology are changing our way of thinking and of doing. And 25 years ago, when I started my work in using mass communications to better the human condition, the world was only able to receive information passively through television and radio. We are now at a new point of human history, which has opened up endless opportunities for development and health, an age of global, instant, widespread, personal, two-way communications. So my work rests on the deeply held belief that we can meaningfully communicate with each other despite the many barriers that separate us as human beings, languages and cultures, tribes and ethnicity, geographies and borders. We have forgotten the commonalities that we have as a species and have instead accentuated the differences like culture and religion. I produce behavior change communications. It is not the same as educational media. Documentaries are generally educational media, but behavior change communications are quite different, and I'm happy to go into the discussion because I know we have a question coming up on educational media. But I'm happy to go into the difference between behavior change communications and educational media. Thank you.
Thank you, Firdos. Ken, would you please introduce yourself next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Ken Patterson. I'm the Director for Grassroots Impact for Results. Results is a nonprofit constituent advocacy organization. So what I do is I train and support a national network of volunteer advocates to lobby their members of Congress here in the United States on policies and programming and funding that address poverty here in the United States and also around the globe. I work mostly on our global issues. The issues that we work on fall into 3 buckets: health, education, economic opportunity. And we train our advocates to develop relationships with congressional offices, the media, and their communities in order to have impact and influence on these issues. I got into Results after spending about 8 years working in international development in West Africa, mostly with the Peace Corps. I've been with Results as a volunteer for 3 years originally, and then 14 years working for Results. I just haven't found anything more impactful to do than the work that I do. I've got a master's degree in higher education and then another one in organizational change management. In terms of just a couple of lessons learned, stories are key to influencing nearly everyone. We often hear people say, you know, give me some numbers, I'm a numbers person. And numbers are helpful a lot of times, but everyone is a story person. It's really how our brains work. And we've learned in our encounters with the media and with Congress that stories are often the single thing that people remember if you're trying to have an impact on them. Another lesson, whenever possible, have people tell their own stories in their own words. Don't speak for them. Find a way to hand them the microphone, because nobody is voiceless. Folks just often can't be put in front of the right audience to tell their stories, and we can do that for them. Don't make people look helpless, but do create empathy. Highlight the injustices of their situations or the need for action with their stories. People who are struggling are really trying to live their lives just like all of us are, and often the systems really have just failed them. And at a time when there are so many solutions to basic health issues, we must highlight that by choice, we, all of us, the world, we just haven't gotten around to making sure that everyone has access to these things. So we should use stories to point that out, and that it's tragic and unfair for people to be experiencing many of the challenges they're experiencing right now.
Thank you, Ken. Natasha, would you please introduce yourself next?
Sure. Thank you, Amy. So my name is Natasha Poggio. I am a design educator, TEDx speaker, social impact strategist. I use design storytelling for social change. I am currently teaching graphic design at the University of Houston downtown, that's located in Texas. And I hope to inspire more, my students to become responsible citizens in the world. I originally was born in Argentina, and I live in many places in the United States for the past 20 years. And my work focuses on social responsible design. I create initiatives that promote awareness of global issues, specifically using human-centered solutions to address problems in global health, environmental issues, and social justice. The project that I have undertaken usually involves students, and the idea is to show the impact and importance of their work so they can bridge different worlds, whether locally or internationally, and with the products and design interfaces that they create to meet the largest number of recipients or users. In 2008, I founded an organization called Design Global Change, which is a design-based collaborative where we work with health and environmental nonprofit organizations to make a positive difference in the world. And we have created many projects, wellness projects, primarily reaching hundreds of communities in Latin America, Africa, and Asia. Regarding that lesson or key guidance regarding storytelling and responsible communication, I would say that you always want to put yourself in the perspective of the recipient of your communication message. The idea is to empathize and understand where they are coming from. In this way, by learning in the context of their needs and desires, what motivates them, you will be able to reach out to what speaks is the thing that speaks to them directly, as opposed to what speaks to you. And also what Ken mentioned just before regarding the idea of understanding that they're coming with different backgrounds, and sometimes what you would imagine it's not correct. So always ask questions and understand how they perceive information, so that way you could target and adapt it to their needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Natasha. Our final panelist today is Lisa Russell. Lisa, would you please introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you for having me. I'm actually calling from Nairobi. I was here for the ICPD 25 conference curating a film program, so this is actually very nice. So my name is Lisa Russell. I work as a filmmaker, but I didn't go to film school. I started off my career in 1999 after getting my master's in public health, working in Kosovo as a humanitarian aid worker, and it was there that I really witnessed the power of storytelling in the global health and development community, because I witnessed and heard a lot of really unethical practices that were being practiced by journalists who were covering the war, and specifically the topic of rape being used as a tool of war. And it just got me interested in becoming a storyteller and using health and human rights lens to tell the stories a little bit differently. So after about 3 years of really buckling down and studying the craft, I now work as a director. I produce, I shoot, and I edit primarily short advocacy videos for different UN NGO agencies. So I've traveled extensively, documenting issues including maternal health, obstetric fistula, the impact of war on young people, HIV/AIDS, climate change, and a whole lot of other topics. I also curate the Women Deliver Film Festival, so I curate a lot of film festivals, which means I see a lot of films from the global health community, which has given me a really interesting perspective in terms of what I feel is effective and maybe what is not so responsible storytelling, and I talk about that a lot. but I am, and lastly, I'm the founder of an initiative called Create 2030, which is about engaging other types of storytellers besides filmmakers, other artists, including musicians and poets and painters or whatnot, in helping to use arts and storytelling and creativity in support of the Sustainable Development Goals. In terms of responsible storytelling, this is probably my ongoing struggle with my own work, and I believe it's sort of a moving target. I don't think we ever get to a point where we are completely responsible storytellers. And there were probably about 3 times I really wanted to quit my career because I couldn't find the solution of how to tell these stories responsibly by addressing sort of the struggles and the challenges and the difficulties certain people face with the desire to not fall into the trap of what's commonly called poverty porn or emotionally exploitative storytelling. So I've worked out some of these ethical problems by doing numerous workshops over the years at Unite for Sight and other universities. I call them narrative justice workshops, so I kind of changed the term from responsible storytelling to narrative justice. But it's all about how can we use film and storytelling to change the narrative of global health. And I would say probably my focus now is that now that storytelling is becoming so popular in the global health space, I'm really trying to mentor and inspire new storytellers to think of storytelling as an actual craft. I teach a storytelling masterclass with Pixar in a Box, where I really talk about story structure and character development and really try to make a difference between storytelling, again, as a craft versus some of the global health messaging and other types of communication tools that are used in this environment. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you to all of our panelists. As you heard, they all have a wealth of expertise and guidance to share with you today. We'll now proceed with the question and answer session. As mentioned, we received questions in advance from you, our audience members. If you have additional questions, please post them in the text box on the left of your webinar screen. Our first question is for Paul. Paul, we are all teachers and learners. How do you incorporate this idea into responsible global health communication?
Well, not to be sort of coy or flippant about this, but I've been going to the Global Health and Innovation Conference for almost a decade now, and even these webinars, like I'm supposedly one of the teachers in this, but I'm also one of the learners as well. Both from the panelists as well as the questions that everyone's asking. So I think having that openness to engage, that you are absolutely constantly learning throughout life from everyone around you. You don't just sort of go from student to teacher at any stage in life. You always have that opportunity to learn. The other thing that I'd say as well, I think one of the motivations that I've certainly picked up from Paul Farmer, Dr. Paul Farmer talks about accompaniment. And I apply that in terms of responsible communication and storytelling as well. As you've heard from some of the other panelists, number one, showing up, listening instead of telling, and giving the individuals and the communities that that you're working with the opportunity to speak for themselves. Sort of being witness, being on the journey and giving voice to the people that you're working with is a very powerful way to really put this into practice from my point of view.
Thank you, Paul. Our next question is for Alex. Alex, how do you move from an idea to creating an effective and responsible narrative?
Thanks, Amy. I think there are a few initial thoughts. One thing is I think that it's important to get clear about what you're actually trying to do, what you're trying to influence, and what story you're trying to tell. Often we have a multitude of goals, and I think focusing in and really narrowing down what our aim is critical. We believe at GHS that to tell a good story and effective communications is based on showing, not telling. So we often have to think through what we need in order to do that. What else do we need to know? Who do we need to connect with? And what do we need to understand to be able to do that? And then I think just one final lesson is that storytelling and narrative-based communications doesn't have to do everything. So often when we tell a story or find a way to communicate with people, what we're doing is whetting people's appetite. We're getting people interested in an issue. We want them to connect with an issue, to feel something, and to be motivated to do more. And often that next step is to learn more. So at GHS, we work a lot with technical practitioners, researchers, scientists in the global health space. And often when we do our work, they often find initially that it feels like an oversimplification of their work. And I think you can approach communications in a number of different ways, and you can get people to feel moved and to want to do something else. And some of that nuance and understanding that detail and the substance can be the next step.
Thank you, Alex. Let's move on to our next question. This one will be for Lisa. Lisa, when you are speaking with or interviewing community members, how do you communicate in a responsible and humble way?
Thank you for the question. Yeah, so obviously a lot of my work requires that I do an extensive amount of interviewing of people who are being profiled in my film. And I do think that there is a skill set in the actual interview process. I have worked on other projects. When I began my film career, I was working for a journalist, and they basically handed me a sheet of 10 questions that they wanted me to ask. And what I felt when interviewing them is that by asking a series of questions that were already laid out, I didn't allow for a natural conversation to happen, and I broke the sort of connection that I had with my subject matter every time I looked down on the sheet to look at a question. And so I think for me, two things. One is how you relate and connect with people of so many different backgrounds, people speaking different languages, people different cultures and all of that, and being the type of just, regardless of your work, the kind of person you are to be able to move in different spaces that maybe are very, very different from who you are and what you're accustomed to. And then secondly, I would say that, you've got to realize that putting a camera in front of somebody and then asking them to, share very intimate details sometimes of their lives is an honor to be able to document it, but also responsibility. And for me, I don't jump into whatever issue I'm filming. If I'm filming, somebody who's HIV positive, I don't lead with a question about being HIV positive. I try to get to know the person as a person first. So if it's a mother, I'll ask about her family and just get the person comfortable speaking to me. And then I also don't look for sound bites. I really try to respect the time that this person, has given to me to share their stories. And there have been film shoots like the film that I did on the impact of war on young people, where I've sat with a former child soldier or a young person from Lebanon, and I interviewed them for over 4.5 hours. Because the story was just that complex and nuanced that required my amount of time. And so I think for me, those would be probably the two biggest things. And I do think we underestimate really how critical the interviewing process is. People, or filmmakers, I should say, get caught up in sort of the technical stuff and what the shot looks like. But if you are not connected to the person you're interviewing, I don't think you're doing their story justice, and I don't think you're going to, come out with maybe the most compelling film that you're looking for.
Thank you, Lisa. Our next question is for Natasha. Natasha, can you please comment on how and why communication varies so widely by context?
Thank you, Amy. So going back to my key guidance on how important perspective is to storytelling, I think that context is everything in storytelling because it matters of how you see your side of the story. So I was just thinking, talking, like with these films and this different type of storytelling that we have participants in this webinar. So imagine like the children's folk tales, like Perrault's Little Red Riding Hood, Caperucita Roja in Spanish. The perspective of the wolf is that he's hungry and, he wants to eat. And the perspective of the little girl is that she's curious and she wants adventure. and also she disregards the rule of never talk to strangers. So perspectives matter a lot, right, and the context. And also in terms of communication, it varies so much because throughout history, people across the world have different ways of expressing their ideas. And they usually take references from the landscapes, the colors of the mountains, the desert, and the wildlife that is around them, the ones that they hunt or they see. So thus they create these custom symbols to represent their messages. And then those are very localized. For example, the colors they might choose are influenced by their sunsets. That would be different mountain areas as opposed to a desert area. And also the symbols that they choose and colors are influenced by their collective beliefs, religious beliefs, and so on. So I think that one important aspect is to contemplate, the idea that in order to understand something, it's like you have to do a lot of research about it.
Thank you, Natasha. Our next question is for Charlotte. Charlotte, how do you engage local partners effectively in an authentic collaboration? What are your greatest lessons learned regarding effective collaboration?
Thank you for this question. I think really what we've learned is good collaboration isn't something that just happens. It really does need to be structured. And that structure comes best when you invest up front in how groups of people or partner organizations are going to work together. And when you do invest the time up front, it really pays off. It's really important that everyone's clear at the beginning what each person and each organization brings to the collaboration, and what individual roles and responsibilities, making sure those are also clear up front. And it's important to embed in the structure of the collaboration opportunities to connect on a regular basis and have honest discourse about what's working and what may need to be adjusted. I think it was Paul that talked about the openness to engage and the importance of listening. And I think listening in a collaborative relationship is really the best tool that any of us have to make sure that the relationship works. And, since we're talking about stories, I can tell a little story about a collaboration. Really everything that we do, we're working with teams of diverse people. And we have a program, for example, in Haiti called La Cucajou. And when we were developing the characters for this animated series, it's for children, early primary school, we started, a Haitian artist was given the directive of creating a character that would be about 6 or 7 years old and be a character that would be very representative of Haitian culture and kind of identifiably Haitian. And he developed a wonderful character that many of us were really thrilled with and kind of signed on and really loved and ready to go forward. And then we opened it up to the whole group of people that were working on the project to review. And it was really interesting because what happened was once other people looked at it, they didn't have the same reaction. They didn't think she was fun enough. They thought the palette was wrong, and they had a lot of critique of it that, of course, at first was hard to hear. But then as everyone sort of worked together, we started to realize that the input was really, really important and interesting and helped to elevate what we did. And then the artist went back, took the comments that he heard and redeveloped the character, and we ended up with a much more whimsical character who's now Lily that everybody really loved. But it was this whole process of people feeling comfortable enough to provide their input and people feeling comfortable enough to listen to that input. So I think it's really about structuring a very trusting relationship where everybody feels like they have a role and that everybody's contributing something very different and very helpful, and that each voice matters.
Thank you, Charlotte. Our next question will be for Firdos. Firdos, how do you tailor educational messages to each community?
Let me start by saying that there's a difference, as I mentioned, between educational messaging and behavior change communications. A lot of what we do in health and I've worked in a very large number of projects in health, is actually behavior change communications. You have to carefully define the objectives. Behavior change communications is not education, although education is almost always a part of behavior change communications, but not the whole part. It is an element of BCC. The goal of behavior change communications and health communications is to change behavior. So the approach must be to persuade a person to change their behavior. And how I do that is by creating something called cognitive dissonance, essentially presenting a different and alternative way of thinking or of doing. We must have the person internalize the message. And what I mean by that is the person has to come to their own conclusion to change their behavior on a health-related issue. You can't impose that from an external source, no matter what and how effective your communication is. So I have what is called a target of one, a target of an individual person, because I believe that we all communicate with each other individually. We both, the way we communicate and the way we accept and process and internalize communications. So my preferred approach in health-related issues has always been, for the last 25 years, to create non-coercive, non-authoritarian approach using humor and using animation. Humor is used to bring the viewer to the serious point at the end that we want to make. And I think that animation and humor have been extremely effective in creating messaging for health communications in particular. So why animation? Let me just tell you for a minute, and I'm not in any way suggesting that every issue should be dealt with by animation, because I do also have a lot of experience in producing documentaries which are much more educational, but they don't create behavior change in all cases, behavior change communication. So why animation? Very briefly, you can reach any audience. You can create universal characters. The audience is accepting because you have what is called a suspension of your disbelief system. I'll give you an example. The best-known work I've done on health-related issues was called The Three Amigos, which is 3 funny animated condoms that went around the world. Over 150 countries use them, and they currently exist in 45 languages and can reach over 80% of the world's population in their own language. How do you get condoms around the world? It's simple. It's because you have a suspension of your disbelief system. You know what you're seeing is not real, therefore you're more accepting of the messaging. You have a global acceptance. You can create everything from a very local program to a global one. It is not realistic. It is easy to sync with other languages, and it allows for innovation. So to come back to the question of education and behavior change, education is a component. Almost every documentary is an educational media, but not every documentary that is educational is behavior change. And I think in health, the work that I've done in health over the last 25 years since that's our topic has been much more in behavior change communications.
Thank you, Firdos. Our next question is for Ken. Ken, you touched briefly on the role of storytelling in global health advocacy work earlier. What types of stories have you found to be most effective in raising awareness and inspiring action?
Yeah, thank you very much. So storytelling is essential in our global health advocacy work, and I think the key role of it is really putting a face on the issues. You know, a lot of times when we're talking about large global health issues, we're using data and trends and research and really very large numbers to describe the problems facing people and their solutions. And so it's hard for people to relate to that sometimes in a personal way, and often it doesn't elicit an emotional response. So in addition, you know, for many of our global health issues that we deal with, the problems and the people we're advocating with, the problems may seem abstract to them because in many cases, the audiences that we're trying to influence They don't have experience with them with tuberculosis or malaria or malnourishment or prenatal care or lack of access to health care in general. But sharing a story creates an image in one's mind that makes it more personal. If it's that person relating the story to themselves personally, it becomes very personal. You get the listener thinking, I really like this person. I can't believe that they and their family and their communities have to go through that. And for us, the people who need to hear the stories as part of this and putting that face on things are really everyone that we need to influence. And that's including elected officials in order to get them to act. That's the media to get them to act and sort of take up issues. We always also need to influence our volunteer advocates who are really doing the core of our advocacy work, because they need that actually to persist in a lot of times themselves. Being an advocate's not easy, and they're often ignored, but having the picture of someone's story in their minds and in their hearts keeps them going. They know who they're fighting for and what they must do, and that they really just can't give up. Oftentimes it's also it's not until the challenge or the pain or the suffering or the injustice becomes an image in one's mind that the motivation to do something also comes into existence. So some examples here. The kinds of stories that are most effective are ones that really sort of line up with the problems and solutions that we're trying to address through our advocacy, and so we try to really line that up. As an example, one of our volunteers is a tuberculosis survivor originally from Afghanistan, and she was with us on Capitol Hill this summer talking about the problem of tuberculosis. And her personal story brought out her struggle, her determination, her fear, and the injustices of the systems that we've created in a way that no data or research or number could do. And then the staff members and the members of Congress that were listening to her they just sat and listened, and more intently than they listened to really anything else that they heard. I was really moved that day personally myself in a way that I'll never forget, and I know they were as well. And I've seen this happen over and over again in our global health issues as well as other issues. Another thing that works, and whenever possible, we bring people in to tell stories about how programs and the things that we're advocating for are actually working well. If we want elected officials to continue supporting programs, we need to see that the programs are working. So stories don't just have to be about the bad side of things or the challenges, but they can also be really about the solutions at work and making things happen.
Thank you, Ken. Our next question will be for Alex. Alex, how can media be used strategically and responsibly as a tool in limited resource settings to promote social and/or policy change?
Thanks, Amy. Media, I think, can be a really effective way to reach broader audiences with your messages and information, and it certainly has significant power to influence public opinion, social norms, and policy. Media isn't monolithic, so when we say media, we are talking about a range of individual reporters, different platforms, reported stories, op-eds, all sorts of things. So I'll just zoom in for a minute on working with journalists, which we've done a lot of in country. And like anything, supporting good and responsible media on the issues that you work on requires investment. And I think if you want to get something covered in the media, you have to think about it from the journalist's perspective, first of all. So why will my audience care about this, and why now? Which can help you approach a journalist with an idea for a story or for something to report on. And then I think the most important piece is that it takes time to build relationships with journalists. And it is important, as you work with them, we have found, to get to know them and how they work. And I think the best way, once you do that, to help work with the media and work with journalists is to position yourself as a resource, and particularly to connect journalists to individuals and groups on the ground who you feel like can support them in good and effective and responsible storytelling. So one quick thing that we've done a lot of are journalist trainings. I've talked at the last couple of Unite for Sight conferences about some work we've done around safe abortion. And I'll just quickly share that in some of our focus countries, including in South Africa, when we did a large media analysis, we found that the media was both really misrepresenting and putting out inaccurate information, but also that there were a whole host of missing voices on the issue of abortion, particularly women who actually had some lived experience with abortion. So what we did is we spent some time trying to fill those gaps, including through hosting journalist trainings, where we brought together journalists who might be interested in the issue with organizations working on sexual and reproductive health, with doctors, and with women who were interested in telling their stories around abortion. And just in doing that, just in connecting the dots and helping journalists connect with that community of people, we've been really blown away by the increase in quality journalism on the issue. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Alex. Our next question is for Paul. Paul, how do you build trust with local partners to encourage authentic communication?
I think we've heard a lot of different facets on that, from everyone on the webinar so far. Big part, I go back to, just some very fundamental, tenets of building relationships. Building trust with local partners. It's about building, strong relationships, and whether that's more of a call it a transactional or sort of a one-off engagement or something over a longer period of time. Number one, showing up and showing some genuine interest. And again, it's back to, listening instead of, assuming and sort of coming with your agenda. I think in this fast-paced world, again, particularly if you're in an agency, everyone is sort of time impoverished, and it's sort of like we've got the deadline, we're under, all sorts of, deadlines and time constraints to get stuff done. But if you don't actually just slow down, make the time, and build those relationships, even if they're short-lived, you're not going to build the trust. There's another piece too that, on that I just, give as a reference. Someone introduced me to Larry Sen almost 20 years ago. And, so, he was one of the founders of Sen Delaney. It's now part of Hedrick and Struggles. But there was a concept, a very powerful but simple concept, that Larry Sen talked about called Be Here Now. And just suggest, Google that, Larry Sen and Be Here Now. And it's just a great reminder of slowing down, taking time to engage, with the individuals that you're working with, and that goes a very, very long way to building trust in my book.
Thank you, Paul. Our next question is for Charlotte. When a project seeks to encourage positive behavior change in children, are there ethical or other considerations that are different from projects that are targeted toward adults?
Thank you. I'm so happy that someone asked this question about ethics, because I think that as media producers, we always need to be thinking about ethical concerns. And when you're working with children, you have to be particularly mindful of the fact that they don't have complete agency and choice in the way that adults do. And so it's always important to be thinking of where the child is and the child's perspective and the child's own situation, and also the child's situation with respect to the adults in that child's life and their parents, and what everyone's wishes are around that. For ethical reasons, and also from a perspective of what is educationally effective, when we're producing media, we really try to focus on presenting what to do rather than what not to do. And, we're working with young children, so that's particularly important. So, for example, again, with our animated series in Haiti, Le Cucajou, when we're presenting health messages about good nutrition or exercise or social emotional health, We always try to do it from by modeling positive behaviors, showing what to do rather than showing what not to do. If you want to have children really learn these behaviors, one of the best ways, especially through media, is to model the behavior in a positive, engaging way, and a way that really is playful and that meets the child from the perspective that they understand and in a context that they understand. So when possible, we embed the messages of that we're trying to promote, the healthy behaviors, we embed them into the plot line. So, for example, our characters, we have a story where our characters, Lily and Tilu, they're having a jump roping contest. And in the course of that, they're learning about how to count. They're counting the number of times that they can skip the rope. But they're also learning about good sportsmanship. They're learning about being active. And it's all kind of part of how to engage in a positive lifestyle. And we think that that's very much important when you're dealing with children in particular.
Thank you, Charlotte. We have time for one last question, which will be directed to Lisa. Lisa, how do you choose which stories to share? What is your process for understanding how individuals and particular stories fit within a community or a shared experience?
Thank you again. So I'll try to answer this very quickly because I know we're running out of time. But in terms of just the formality of choosing stories to share, there are two processes, ways that I get involved in projects. One is that I'm contracted, so I get contracts with UN NGO agencies, some really great agencies, to produce content that they're looking for, whether it's for their website or a conference or whatnot. And then secondly, I produce just content on my own, something that I might care about, and I just choose a film project that I want to engage in. And those have very, very different workflows. They have very different outcomes, and they have very different processes. And I think because, when I'm contracted, really the motive behind telling a particular story is sort of driven by whatever, for lack of a better word, whatever agenda the organization or institution is looking for. So if they're hoping to, affect policy, if they're looking to fundraise, all of those will dictate my process and the types of stories I tell and the way that I tell them. I'm mostly, I think, best in a space where I use my films to engage wider audiences in global health issues. My first film was on obstetric fistula, in 2003, 2004, when people weren't really aware of what that was. So it was a real challenge to, figure out how to relay this complex and delicate topic to people who are outside of the global health community. And then my next project was on unsafe abortions in Ethiopia, which sort of had the same, challenges. But I think that, when I do my own particular projects, I'm not driven by an agenda that is related to anything that maybe an organization or institution might be driven by. My goal or my mission is genuinely to move somebody. So I will use all the tools at my fingertips and ideas and the creativity without any sort of concerns about, okay, how is this going to relay and what am I doing? And I'm able to fully create in the way that I would like. And I think, just to give you an example, like the two short poetry films that I did, one won an Emmy and the other one got into 35 international film festivals. And those were done with very little money, but they were completely my creative doings. And I think that in some ways, the impact that had on the audience that I was looking for may have been stronger than some of the films that I was producing as a contracted filmmaker. And I just wanted to bring that up a little bit, not to say that there's anything wrong with any of those agendas, but just sort of understanding what is it that we're actually trying to do with storytelling. And if you do want to use storytelling in its most powerful form to move people with no other, agendas attached, but purely to move somebody, because once you move an audience, you have them, you grab them, and then you have to figure out how to quickly supply all the information that you want, all the data, the statistics, the calls to action or whatnot. But if we as a community really want to engage the power of storytelling, I just want to end this by saying, I was at an event recently where, storytelling in arts is becoming very trendy and very popular, but it's being driven by people who are not artists and storytellers. And that is really, I think, gonna dilute the power of what we have. And so I just want to say, and maybe just even my own appeal to, as we get more excited about storytelling and about art, let's give artists and storytellers like a real seat at the table. Let us help drive this movement, if that's what you want to call it, and let us set the stage. Let's have support and conversations or whatnot, because similar to what big movements like Me Too and Time's Up or whatnot, a lot of these movements that are related to global health topics are not driven by global health institutions or organizations. They're driven by individuals with a really, powerful story and are passionate about that. So I think if we're going to make the most out of storytelling and for it to be mostly responsible, we need to give artists and storytellers a seat at the table.
Thank you, Lisa. And thank you so much to all of our phenomenal panelists for sharing your insights and expertise today with our webinar audience. This concludes today's webinar.